Looks like it's running.
Guys, I have to step away for just a second. I've got to make a call, but I
Yep.
won't be going anywhere.
Okay. Okay, so we are live streaming and we're recording to the cloud. We don't have, so we have 22 members, so we don't have 13 for a, or what am I saying, 12 for a quorum. So we're just going to get going. If somebody else comes in, and at the end of the meeting, if we still have everybody on, we'll have we'll entertain anything to vote on, like the minutes. But in the meantime, I think we should just get going. So we do have an agenda. So with that, I'm going to, I think I already did share my screen, Francisco. So I will let you take over and start your presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sharon. And if I can find my presentation, it's not showing up now in my selections, then we'll be in good shape.
Yeah, I have it up if you need it.
There we go. Okay. All right.
Gotcha.
This took a minute or two last night, so just let me know when you could see the presentation.
Yep, we can see it.
Yeah. Okay. It should be switching to presentation mode shortly. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. This is our 14th meeting, and we've got a very straightforward agenda this evening, and that is really to review the workshop and survey findings, and to very briefly talk about our next steps. So let's jump into that. So many of you were in attendance at our workshop a couple weeks ago now on December 2nd. We had a pretty good turnout, all things considered, approximately 50 attendees. And we, for those of you that were there, you know how this worked. But for those that weren't, we had 6 breakout sessions, and those were topic based, and we'll review those topics individually. So jumping right into it, what we did is we, as I mentioned, we had 6 breakout sessions. So we were at the Palace Theater, and we had 6 different areas where we had someone from our team there specializing in that area. And by example, natural resources, Anthony Zemba from my office was at that station. We had some content aboard with some maps and relevant information. And we engaged in what were 20-minute discussions with people participating. And we asked them to identify the issues surrounding that topic. And then we followed up that discussion with ideas for resolving and addressing those issues. So what I'd like to do this evening is go through these topic areas one by one. And these aren't all of the notes that we recorded, but really a summary of some of the main themes with some individual comments mixed in. And what I'd like you folks to help us do is to understand what you feel are really the primary issues, the key issues that we should address and pay attention to within the POCD. And likewise, when we get into discussion about ideas, tell us which ideas that you really resonate with you, that you think are promising for addressing some of these issues. So starting with natural resources, we heard concerns about flooding, and somewhat related to that, development that it encroaches upon the Still River and maybe exacerbates that flooding. We also heard that the city has a lot of parks and open space that people don't fully appreciate, and perhaps some of that is associated with limited access to some of those parks or open spaces. We also heard that many of the trees lost by recent storms have not been replaced. There's not a very robust tree replacement or planting program, and that many of the street trees in the city are in conflict with sidewalks and utility lines. And so when you do have storm events, those trees can take down utility lines and ultimately have to be cut down. Additionally, there's concerns about the environmental impact of residential development on large parcels. and also concerned about invasive species and invading habitats such as along the Still River. So before I flip to the next slide, and while we have this in front of us, I would invite anyone just to let us know what you think regarding some of these issues that came out of the workshop. Is there something here that we should really be paying attention to?
A lot of it has to do with my departments. I guess I should jump right in.
Yeah, go
Starting
ahead.
with the first line, flooding. We're working on areas of flooding such as the East Ditch, which takes a lot of the downtown flooding, and West Street, which is very shallow and confined elevation due to the train bridge. So we have some constraints there, but they have to be focused on. The East Ditch is, I think 20 years ago when it was slated and estimated for replacement, it was in the 11 to $12 million range, and that was 20 years ago.
Right.
So yeah, that still should be something we strive to repair. Parks and open space, I'm not sure exactly, maybe more parking. I'm not certain. We'd have to take a look at more closely what they're looking at there. Limited access. We have a lot of parks. They do have good parking and accessibility. So I'm not certain what they're looking for there. But trees and sidewalks and utility lines is always going to be an issue. We're losing the tree-lined streets because the trees in our snow shelf are, some of them are 250 years old and are in conflict with sidewalks.
Right.
And what do you replace them with so that you don't have this same issue in 20 years? So there is a policy that needs to be made. Do we offer private homeowners trees so that they get them off of the snow shelf, but we continue to have trees lining our streets? Because basically inside of the sidewalks is the property line. So that's an issue that has to be addressed. And utility line companies constantly work on cutting the trees out of their footprint on the utility line, which doesn't look very good, but it keeps them from power outages. And we do have an active forestry department that takes down a lot of trees, but we don't get the money to replace a lot of trees. And we don't, like I said, don't want to put them back in the snow shelf because we're just repeating the process. So we have to look at that again. Normally, when we plant the trees every year, we plant them in parks.
Right. Okay.
Paul, you had your hand raised.
Yeah.
If you were done, Tim.
Yeah, I hear that a lot about replanting trees, and it is true that some of these streets, Pleasant Street, the south end anyway, Oleana, have just amazing canopies. Some of the people have actually moved to those streets because of the canopy. Believe it or not, they actually have done that. I've spoken to them. But you really can't have a canopy in sidewalks. They're really in conflict. I don't know what to do about that. I've never known what to do about that except to just keep replanting trees. And when I was a kid, we were responsible for our own sidewalks. We actually had a sidewalk inspector, and he was not someone to be trifled with. And you would get a ticket, and you'd have to dig up your sidewalk and re-pour it. And we never ever thought that, well, it's not our fault. It's the city's fault for having these trees. We love the trees, but the people who live in these areas now have a very different take on sidewalks, and they feel that, yeah, they're their sidewalks, but the city needs to take care of them, and it's the city's fault for having the trees. So the two things are in conflict, and you can't combine those two things. As Tim said, you can put them outside on the other side of the sidewalk, but it's just going to pop the sidewalks up from the other side. I don't know the answer to that, except to have small trees without canopies. In terms of flooding, that's probably the number one issue on this list. The city is moving forward on that. The East Ditch, there may be a less expensive way to do that. So instead of it flooding, 2 or 3 times a year, it floods every couple of years, which would make a huge difference to the people living down there. Development too close to the Still River, maybe not. I mean, it has been in the past, but we've got a pretty strict EIC department, which Sharon, you know about that, and they take a pretty dim view of runoff now. It's all got to be channeled and metered and all that stuff. So I think we can probably handle that. And we're seeing some downtown development that's not close to the Still River. It's pretty much on top of the Still River, and I think I think those two things can coexist. Underutilized parks and open space, probably a little bit more reach out. I mean, that's not a the river thing, the flooding, that's strictly government. The people can't fix their way out of that, but underutilized parks and open space, they can just, word of mouth and stuff, they can access those parks. They're open to everybody. Limited access. I'm not seeing that in the parks that I go to, whether it's Farrington or Terrywile or the dog, you just go to them. But I mean, for people who can't just hop in their car and go to them like a lot of people can, then maybe that's an issue. Maybe we could look at a weekly jitney or something like that brings people that are essentially homebound to our park so that they can recreate too, even if they don't have transportation. That could be something we could look at. The trees, obviously, we talked about that. Residential development in large parcels of land is always a concern because, frankly, we need revenue. The city needs revenue, and we need to grow our way out of, in terms of revenue, out of some of these problems that we're experiencing right now. And to do that, we need to build. And in this area, we're used to building horizontally. Maybe we need to look at building vertically. I mean, that's something that could be a consideration. But I mean, we can't. There is no one. I don't think there's anybody in the city, any decision makers, that would seriously consider a moratorium on building. I don't think that can coexist with a city with the issues that Danbury has. And in terms of things like Mexican bamboo, Japonica, Falopia, big problem all over the world. England's going crazy about that. I mean, you just cut it back. You can't get rid of this stuff. You can't get rid of the zebra mussels. There's this new crab that's coming, and you can't get rid of that. You just have to manage it. And I think what we'll have to do is triage. There will be some places where we really go after this 2 or 3 times a year, and it's going to take some resources. And there'll be other areas where, until they come up with some sort of a biological cure, we're just going to have to let go. I mean, because you can't get rid of it. It's impossible to get rid of it. And I don't mean like really hard. I mean impossible. I've had contractors that have dug down 3 feet, scraped everything off, and replanted with sterile soil, and one tiny leaf propagated again, and it comes right back. So we recognize that. Fry's Corner, we're cutting it back every year. We're gonna have to work on the Still River. But yeah, some of these are problems that are fixable, and some of them are really just manageable. But there's nothing on here that I'm looking at that can't be improved by the city and is being improved by the city. So I think we're on a lot of this stuff, especially coming from Tim's department, which, as Tim noted, is pretty much responsible for a lot of this stuff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Richard, go ahead. Richard, your mic is not working. I know you're not muted, but your mic, can you figure out how to switch your mic maybe? Give that a try. All right, we'll keep coming, and we'll come back to you, Richard, jot down your thoughts if you could. All right, let's move on to the next page. In the case of some of these issues or topics, we have more than one slide for issues. Natural resources, it was just one. So here we are into the ideas. One of the ideas was to conduct a hydrologic or hydraulic study of the Still River Basin to identify measures that should be taken to protect the river and reduce flooding. Also improve and better maintain stormwater infrastructure, develop a management plan for and manage beaver populations as a means of mitigating flood risk, dredge portions of the Still River, prevent future encroachment on the Still River, reduce non-compatible uses in riparian zones, such as parking lots. Enhance the Still River so it becomes an aesthetic resource or attraction. Consider a river walk along the edge. At the same time, improve access to the Still River, and better balance or better communicate the management approach to Lake Kenosha. I think there's a certain level of awareness of the conflict between some of the desired recreational uses and the need to potentially hold that as a water supply reserve. So let's talk about these that we have in front of us.
Again, if you like, starting from
Yeah,
the
Tim,
bottom.
go ahead.
Lake Kenosha is a state-owned property, and we will not have the ability to have water supply from that. And the only supply that we've used it for is skimming when the
Right.
water level goes up. That is being taken away from us. The state's not allowing it. I don't remember the date, but it's approaching quickly. So that one's a moot subject. The rest of
Okay.
that has been managed to put in buffer zones, one, to keep the geese in the water, and two, to help sediment runoff. So we have buffer zones around the lake. So a lot of money has been spent there for that. Let's see. Stormwater, a lot of that is covered by MS4 and or by road improvements. When we improve our roads, we make sure we improve the stormwater infrastructure under it. And we also have a management program for beaver, which are a problem. Every 2 years, beaver are kicked out of the hut and go looking for a new body of water to live in. So we work with the state and trap it every winter. Both the state properties off of Route 7 and our water bodies throughout the city. So there is a development program or management program there. And when we don't, in the past, when times have been skipped, they become a problem. We're, like Rogers Park Pond right now is high because there's beavers on the Bethel border that we're working with a trapper now to. So that's, we're managing it. We manage it every year. Dredging was done in the channel to the Still River last year. I believe you can ask, I believe part of the sidewalk work that's going to be done downtown may include some improved access to the Still River, but I haven't seen that. I don't know if Sharon can speak to that.
Tim, is there more dredging that needs to be done to the Still River? Are there segments that have not yet been addressed?
We do. Our responsibility to the Army Corps of Engineers is only the section of Still River from White Street past, I think a couple hundred yards past Triangle Street, where it's a box culvert, a U channel, and then a natural V channel. And that really I actually do 2 inspections on those a year and send it to the Army Corps to show that we are walking it and inspecting it. And the biggest problem is vegetation and deltas that occur in the water flow. So there needs to be money spent there, but it's just not one of the resources that we throw money at. Unfortunately, every few years, we get capital and we put a contractor in there to clean it up, but it grows back within a year.
Okay.
If I can't, Richard, let's see if we can hear Richard and then I'll jump in. No, I'm not, we're not getting any audio from you.
Richard, there is in the invitation, there is a call-in number. You might try calling in from your phone, dialing the call-in number for a conference call. At least we could hear you that way.
Yeah, he said okay.
All right.
Okay, let me just comment on a couple of things. I do believe, and Tim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the Army Corps has actually expressed some interest in doing some studying of portions of the Still River. determining some base flood elevations. Antonio had brought that up at the council meeting a couple months back. So, because there are portions of the river that we don't have base flood elevations for. So that is, we're continuing to work on that.
That's my understanding as well. But some of the issues we have with that, we have a responsibility to the section that I just described.
Exactly.
Much of the remainder of the water bodies, lakes, streams, such and such, or not lakes, but streams and brooks through the city are privately owned. Property owners, property lines meet in the center of them.
Right.
So that's part of the problem, when you're looking at some of these studies where you have trees and natural dams that are starting to occur. We can't access them without destroying properties to get to their property. So do we hold them accountable for cleaning the rivers behind their house? That's always been kind of an issue.
Right. Yeah, and then there's been capital funding for, doing the dredging along the Still River. I think an overall comment, if I can just, and Francisco and I talked about this a little bit during the course of the sessions, that many times people don't know actually what the city's doing. And so getting the message out, getting, in a different way, I don't know what is we're doing a lot of the things that people don't think we're paying attention to. So I think we have, I don't know where that shows up in the plan, but we should talk about that. The sidewalks, the sidewalk project itself won't have any impact on the Still River. What we do have is a separate project, which is downtown, to improve kind of what we've called the River Walk, which is the open portion, above the open portion of the Still River along White Street, to improve that kind of segment of sidewalk. And it actually greases the cover of the 2019 TOD study, a concept. So we're working on that concept. There was funding for it in the SNAP bond. And so we're working to do that hopefully in next year. The other thing that didn't get brought up on the issue side of things, and I'm going to bring it up on the idea part, and I know Ed's on the call, is just about the, we have a lot of commissions and organizations involved in the protection of natural resources, and we've talked about ways to either consolidate, have some, point person, either within City Hall, or just a better management of all the different commissions, so we know what somebody knows what everybody's doing, and the commissions are kind of more coordinated, I guess. I don't know, Ed, if you want to kind of jump in on that. I mean, I think that's, yeah.
Yes, that's one of the things that I've seen. And I chair the Still River Commission, and I'm do consulting for the Lake Kenosha Commission. So, and I interact with the Conservation Commission, and there's a lot of there's really no coordination between some of these, and there's a lot of overlap in a lot of cases, and it seems very inefficient when I look at it. I've talked to various folks for a number of years about how we would look at doing that as some of these commissions come up for sunset. Maybe there's a way to reorganize things if we have a plan that we're all behind. So just the potential for a way to make it more efficient.
Okay, it's
Right.
Cam.
I can just put this back on. So
Oh, we hear you, Richard. We got you
Yeah,
now.
we hear you. Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, you're up.
Okay, thanks. I had a question. My question was this: with the responses that we got from the meetings, are we obligated to, as we're discussing now, as to what's been done and some of the issues that we're having, are we obligated to a written response so that people could see the questions? And then our responses to these so that they know that their time, wasn't wasted? I was just thinking, I didn't know what our position was, or put it that way, not so much our responsibilities.
Yeah, as part of the plan, the final document, we will summarize the feedback received from the workshop and other outreach efforts, whether it be the survey or the focus group meetings, and synthesize that information and provide some explanation as to how we are responding to those.
Right.
It isn't a comment by comment
Right.
response per se, so much as summarizing the key issues identified and then describing our approach to addressing those issues, which will be presented within the plan.
Because from what I'm hearing, it seems like many of these issues are being taken care of, or basically, put it that way, being taken care of in one way or the other. So I think some sort of a general response, would be good. So at least they feel that their time wasn't wasted. Okay, that's basically it. That was my only concern, was to get a feedback to them, which was good. Thank you. I'm glad my microphone is working.
Yeah, we are too.
Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Richard.
Sure.
Anybody else? Paul, did you have your hand back up?
Yeah, I did. Just briefly, there's a couple of things the city might want to consider doing on the ordinance side. The Danbury's wet, and the 6th Ward is probably the wettest part of Danbury, which runs from Blind Brook out to the New York border and down to Bennett's Farm Road on Route 7, which, just think about that for a minute, all those valleys and all that water. And we hear constantly that some of these smaller condominium associations that were granted permission to build are no longer maintaining their runoff the way that they were originally supposed to in order to get these permits. And very often we hear from affected parties, from adjacent neighbors, people who are deleteriously affected by the runoff, flooded basements that never flooded before, etc., that they're told that it becomes a civil matter, that they have to take these people to court. And I don't particularly agree with that. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't know in what basis of law that is, but it would seem to me that if we had an ordinance that simply required associations, builders, whatever, to maintain these, it would go with a project with the land in perpetuity to maintain these things. If there was an issue of non-maintenance, that the city could step in and force the hand of these recalcitrant people who have sort of washed their hands of the situation. Sometimes these associations break up. One big association becomes 2 or 3, and nobody's responsible for the retention pond. That has to change. And in addition, Tim brought up easements. That's a huge problem with Blind Brook. We can't get in there, and the walls are collapsing. And that thing was downtown 5 feet wide. Now in some areas it's less than 3 feet, and we need to get in there and open that back up. And I think that we need to look at forcing easements on some of these riparian rights of the city without going through the legal department and spending 17 years trying to do this. Can just some sort of eminent domain easement system that we would not abuse, that we would only use if other areas of town were being affected by non-maintenance of your own river. That we should probably look at that too, because Ben and I have been dealing with this for 20 years, and some of these problems have not only they not been solved, they haven't even been managed in that time, because there's just really no place to turn. And at some point you just have to say, look, there's got to be a better way to do this, and it may be through somewhat of a stronger ordinance system than what the city now has. We're not getting any smaller, and we are building adjacent to all of these things, and more people are becoming affected. And in the days of, well, it's just kind of too bad, that's ending. People just expect a little bit more, so maybe we need to do that. Yeah, we have to do something.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else on natural resource ideas before we move on to the next slide.
Just a comment that I love seeing all the stuff about the Still River, because outside of ecological concerns, where I think we can do a lot more, especially with the invasive species down there, it's an amazing resource as a recreation resource. And I wish it didn't involve 2 other towns, but it could be a phenomenal canoe trail starting in Danbury and ending at one point in the Brookfield Four Corners and at a second point at the park there in New Milford. And it could be a real attraction to the area because there's very few waterways that are as navigable for as long. But unfortunately, the storms we've had make it a unbearable cost to clean up. So just a note for the future, but I do think it's an amazing resource we could have down the line.
Okay, Edward? Ed?
There, I'm back on. Yeah, just following up on that comment too. On the Still River Greenway, we've noticed normally, we'll get 1, maybe 2 storms a year that overtop the river in the area of the trailhead behind Kimchuk, and we usually clean that up. That's part of the normal doing business to keep the handicap path clear. This year, it's happened 3 times to the point where there was a foot of silt over the top of the handicap path. And I think there's a possibility in my mind that we've got log jams in the river in various locations that may be causing some of that because the water can't pass downstream fast enough. Chasing it a little bit this year, I found there's some massive log jams in a couple of places along the river, adjacent more or less to the city sewer easement behind Lowe's the theater and home improvement in that area. And there may be others as well, but I'm wondering how much of the flooding that we may see upstream may be impacted by some of those massive log jams.
I think you're right, Ed, and I've marked a few of them on a map. Unfortunately, it's hard to get to a lot of them, but I will send you what I got at some point.
Great. And I'd also say that we've observed one of the access points to the Greenway behind Lowe's Theater has been washed out 4 times because I believe they've got their stormwater system for that entire parking lot discharges through a large structure there. And there's something going on because it's over top that thing and it's torn a 3-foot deep trench, 30 feet long, right through the access point. And the city's repaired it several times, just keeps getting washed out. And I think there's something has changed in the last few years because that was never an issue before. So I suspect we've got, a stormwater management issue with respect to that parking lot behind the theater.
All right, thanks, Ed. We got it all.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to move on because
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
quickly burning minutes here. There are a few more ideas. I think we covered a lot of this ground already. It surrounds saving trees and forestry. And I think we're all in agreement that, the city could probably benefit from some more resources to plant trees, and we need to figure out where to put those trees. And proactive management of invasive species will continue to be important. Okay.
Yep.
All right, transportation. We've got a couple slides on this, so let's not spend all our time just on this slide alone. There's some concerns that development in the city does not properly plan for the transportation impact, and that mostly surrounds people concerned about big developments putting cars in the road without seeing improvements to the roadways to accommodate those trips generated. Concerns, of course, about the operation of I-84 and its impact on local travel. And sidewalks needing improvement, whether it be repair of sidewalks or expanding the sidewalk network to to areas such as near Danbury High School. Any thoughts on these issues identified before I move on to the next slide?
The only comment I have on sidewalks, expanding
Yeah.
sidewalks, is you have to be very careful because sidewalks have to be maintained. So we're either putting that upon the property owner, or we're taking it on as a city to maintain it. And that means, you know, an incredible amount of additional workforce during winter months to maintain a sidewalk that may be in our right of way and not the responsibility of a homeowner. The
Right.
state does that every time they improve a bridge, they put in a new sidewalk, and they actually sign it over to the city. So we have to be very careful we'd love to see sidewalks all over the city, but we have to be very careful on the language on who is going to maintain that, or we're going to create a liability for the city that, you know, we're just increasing our liability due to sidewalks.
Now, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but as it stands right now, if the city builds a sidewalk on private property or in front of a private parcel, that property owner is responsible for shoveling it in the winter. Is that correct?
Ordinance for the city indicates that all maintenance of a sidewalk and curb in front of, and a basin for that matter, is the responsibility of the homeowner on that footage. State statute indicates that the city is liable for any trip and fall on that sidewalk. So it's state statute supersedes the maintenance requirement that the city's ordinance has. So even though it's there and they're supposed to be maintaining it, if they don't and someone trips and falls, it's the city's responsibility to defend itself against that liability.
Okay. Paul, is that a new hand raised or an old hand raised?
That's a new one, Francisco. Thanks.
Okay.
You know, we all, well, most of us saw the Westchester County's slideshow on the new train station and the complexity of that. But I'm thinking that if that were to come to fruition, might solve some of these problems. The state of Connecticut is handing out huge checks now to Enfield, to Derby, to New Haven, to address some of their train station issues. And the money, if you look at Enfield's $35 million and Derby's $12 million for their train stations, if you multiply that or base that against population, works out to something in the area of like $68 to $88 million for those particular towns. And while the costs have not yet been revealed for this train station, the word has it that it's going to be around $50 million to run a train from the old Danbury train station to Grand Central, and that trip would take about an hour. If you can actually get to New York City from Danbury in the same time it takes to drive, or in less time, and 60 minutes would actually cover like both of those issues. You have to think it's going to remove a lot of traffic, not only from 84, but also from Mill Plain. And God knows what that's going to turn out to be down the road. It could be transformative. So this is one of those big project issues that may have a major effect on the west side of Danbury. That's something that needs to be considered and maybe incorporated in this. But we have to absolutely turn the heat up on Connecticut. If they're handing out more money per capita than some of these other towns, and they haven't even announced a penny for Danbury, that's a big problem that we're going to have to look at.
Well, let's go on to our next slide, because we did get into some discussion about the rail service with participants. As we understand it, the HART bus service is limited, and this was brought up, and it's limited with respect to frequency and routes and bus stop amenities. There was concern about intercity bus service no longer serving Danbury. The existing commuter rail service very limited as well. So building on Paul's comment about more transit perhaps being a real game changer here. Any thoughts on the existing transit services and the limited nature of those services. Are people pretty much hitting it on the mark here that the transit's limited?
Well, I think from the commuter rail perspective, yes.
Yeah.
And I agree with Paul, and you know, we're continuing to be involved in you know, promoting that that option for the old train station and the connection to Southeast. Not just in terms of economic impacts, but transit related, air quality, all the other trickle down positive impacts of getting cars off the road. I agree that, you know, Peter Pan was here and is no longer here. I don't know where there's no, I don't think they're operating within the city as far as, so that could be a problem. The limitation on the I mean, they do run their pulse service. I mean, they still it was down with COVID, but you know, they're back up in terms of, you know, for the population that they use. A lot of people don't use the bus service, but they do have a significant number of routes. You know, it just may not be as useful to some people as it is to others. So, I mean, a couple of years ago, they had almost 1 million bus riders in a year. That's a lot.
Wow. Yeah.
That's pretty significant. And I think it's important that we focus on moving the pulse point over, and we've talked about that internally for next year in terms of capital funding, ARPA money, things like that, to continue that analysis that was in the 2019 TOD plan about relocating the pulse point over near the train station and that will help promote the connections between the bus and the rail. So I think that's, you know, we're going to move ahead on that as well, for which we should be receiving some funding. Paul, I agree with you, because that's in line with everything Connecticut DOT and everyone else is talking about in terms of you know, transit-oriented development and connections.
Okay. Well, let's go on to some of the ideas people had for addressing those issues. And once again, we had a couple slides here. And directly addressing the issue of new development was to conduct studies of local corridors throughout the city to develop a plan to accommodate existing traffic and future growth along those corridors in all directions. And the idea of pairing economic development with a comprehensive transportation plan. And, you know, I don't know exactly what that looks like. You know, perhaps we lay out a vision of what that looks like within the POCD. And maybe that's somewhat related to just a policy that for X amount of dollars of development that you have, there will be a certain type of investment made to the city's transportation infrastructure. Furthermore, is to support the ongoing I-84 planning work and to try to ensure that whatever design is chosen or the solutions identified through that planning study directly address the traffic issues on local streets generated by the highways operations now and in the future. And then expand the sidewalk network, realizing there are some challenges there related to both maintenance and liability. Any questions or comments on these ideas that surfaced?
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, when we do the commissions, when they look at new developments, they do an analysis is prepared and reviewed internally, looking at potential traffic impacts and what mitigation is necessary. Again, there's only certain things that we can require if it's an administrative approval. And so there's some legal implications with that. On the real quick, on the I-84, there are many of us that sit on the PAC committee of I-84, and that's what we continue to, and Marcy can attest to that because she hears us all the time talking about what the, being concerned about potential impacts to our established neighborhoods from whatever plan they come up with. And then, yeah, I mean, pursuing grant funding for sidewalk, yeah, we continue to do that and make improvements and invest in, I mean, in our sidewalks from a capital standpoint.
Right, right. How about it, you know, Tim talked about some of the challenges surrounding this, but how about expansion of the sidewalk network? How viable is that as an idea that the POCD could support? You know, expanding it out towards the high school, towards the mall, Mill Plain Road, near busy bus stops.
I sure support it. I mean, I can tell you that I'd be voting for that on the council. I think you have got, there's a couple of quarters where you've got to have a sidewalk. You have to connect downtown Danbury to the mall. As long as the mall continues to be the preeminent shopping area in Danbury, you've got to be able to do that. Hanging it along, that Tim could address, he's more into that kind of construction than I am. Hanging it along that segment of Park Avenue that drops off is problematical, but not insurmountable. But you've got to have a sidewalk that goes down there. I'll leave for another day. It's not my ward. The issue of Clafford Ridge and the high school. But there are a couple of areas where we are really under sidewalked. I mean, it's just kind of shocking for a city of Danbury size and stature to still, we still haven't recodified the city and the town, which we did in 1965, but we still in many ways look at the you know, west of Division Street area, which was the original border between the city and the town, as it's sort of a town. And it isn't anymore. And we have to make these connections, and people demand it, and it's the right thing to do. So yeah, it's got to get done. I take Tim's point. It's a scary thing. It would be like selling your car to somebody, but you'd still be liable as they drove it around. And if they got in an accident, you'd be billed for it. It's a very scary thing from a city's point of view to have sidewalks that we are liable for, but yet private property owners have to maintain. Puts us in a very strange position. That's something that really should be addressed at the state level. But nevertheless, there are some places, I'd love to see them everywhere, but there are some places where we really have to have them.
Yeah, Jen and I mean, Jen, when she reviews plans, I mean, we get pushback all the time when we say, okay, this is your site plan, we want a sidewalk. And they're like, sidewalk? I don't want to, who's going to walk on the sidewalk? Well, if you don't get, you know, take the opportunity when somebody at their front door, when somebody's approving their site for whatever use and require them to put a sidewalk because A, there's an existing connection, or B, there's some future connection, then we're sitting around talking about, oh, we should have, could have, would have, and we didn't. So sometimes you see sidewalks, they stop like on Park, you know, in front of the Park Avenue is a great example, right? Stops at the orthodont or I can't think of the doctor's office across from Schaeffler. But eventually,
Farm,
you know, yeah, eventually it'll connect, or because we do see people walking in the on the side of the road, and you know they're going back and forth to the mall. There's also, I think, some needed investment in the existing sidewalks in around the downtown and in other areas that just they need to be replaced. I mean, it's difficult to walk, and so people are in the road just because the sidewalks are, you know, they're ripped up, or the trees, or for one reason or another. So I think I do think we need a plan. We've talked about, you know, a fee in lieu of putting in sidewalks, and then we decide where we spend the fee money to improve sidewalks. I mean, there's lots of different ways to kind of skin the cat, but I do think we need to continue to invest in our sidewalks and program and plan for it.
Okay. All right, well, let's move on. We do have one more slide of ideas here. City bus, I'll let you read it. It's mostly related to you know, expanding routing, maybe rerouting some buses, improving bus shops or stops, excuse me, improving the connection at the train station. and then finally trying to recruit an intercity bus operator to reestablish a presence in Danbury. Much of this is beyond the city's immediate control, but
Right.
the POCD is certainly, it's well within the realm of a POCD to take a position that the city should continue to coordinate with operators to try to improve services along these lines.
Yep.
Okay.
I think they're all smart ideas. I can't expand on them.
All right. And finally, it is the rail station options, of course, with a lot of excitement around the Maybrook line to Brewster. Also, people that were very interested in continuing to see improvement to the Danbury branch line itself, including electrification, expansion of service to the north as well.
If I may, I remember being down at that train station 15 years ago with a couple of senators who were promising electrification, re-electrification, because it used to be electrified. And it's just one of those things that never really happened. My take on that, though, is that trains at some point, very soon, because I think this is going to, the electrification of transportation is going to happen. It's just one of those slow drip things. Until you're drowning, it's going to happen and happen and happen, and nobody pays attention to it. And then it's going to be right in your face. I think trains will probably, that will happen with trains. They will themselves become electric. And that will simply eliminate the need to electrify that line. You could then take an electric train, a battery operated electric train from Danbury to Penn, and not have to worry about diesel. I think that would probably, I think the market and technology would do that a lot faster than the state or the federal government putting in catenary lines. Because I just don't see that happening. It should happen. I just don't think it's going to happen. Because it hasn't happened since I've been in politics, and I've been told by the federal government it was going to happen. Started happening in 18 months. It was back in the 90s, and then again 5 years, every 5 or 10 years. We're going to do this. Don't worry about it, Council. We're going to do it. Never gets done.
All I heard them say a couple of years ago would be at least 10 years before they do upgraded engines, never mind re-electrification. So
I know, but and then they come out and they say it's going to shave 8 minutes off this trip and 7 minutes. Like, wow, that's great, because it all adds up to like a half hour, and then it just never happens. So maybe the batteries will happen first. But I'm putting my money on the southeast line. I think that's the future.
Okay. All right. Anything else on this? All right, let's move on. And I'm going to try to keep the tempo high here so that we can get through everything. Economic development. These are the issues that surfaced. And it starts with the fact that people had the perception that the city lacks a vision for what it wants to be and how it wants to grow. I think that's the core of many of the comments that we heard, was that people just don't know where it's all going, what it's all leading to. And a lot of that surrounds the downtown and the need to really have the downtown be a much more vibrant place and a true center, a true downtown for the city. Related to that is the need for more affordable housing in the city. And this is a housing issue and an economic development issue. More people you have that can afford to live in the city, young folks with jobs, they have spending potential, they become part of a downtown scene. It's a positive cascading cycle. However, there are some real negative perceptions surrounding the downtown, that there's nothing going on there or whatever it may be. There's desire to broaden the mix of businesses to attract people, just more active activities in the downtown, such as gyms. There's a desire to balance job growth with investments in mobility and infrastructure. There's concerns about the changing retail market, potentially the future of the mall. And once again, coming back to the idea of planning around the city's corridors is the need for a master plan for corridors along the city and allowing for more mixed use along those corridors. All right, any thoughts?
Yeah, if I may, I don't think Danbury particularly lacks a vision. I just don't think the vision is necessarily that clear. And I'm not really talking about branding, but just sort of a thought experiment. When you think of Norwalk, you might think of going down there to party. Think of Stamford, you might think about white collar working. New Haven is a college town. Hartford is sort of this insufferably boring insurance town. It's not, but that's sort of what you think about. When you think about Danbury, nothing really comes into focus. And I don't mean like the Hat City or Elm City kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I know what Danbury wants to be. Danbury wants to be bigger and richer. That's what Danbury wants to be. And it's moving in that direction phenomenally quickly. It is a transformative town. It just keeps reinventing itself every 5 minutes. But it does not have a focused brand. And it is true that the downtown, the Main Street corridor really has no focus at all. But there are lots of things to do in Danbury. And that is not a message that's necessarily getting out. We may have wanted the entertainment district to be on Main Street. It turned out to be on Lake Avenue and Mill Plain. I mean, who knew? But it's there. And you can recreate there and have amazing dinners every night of the week and never go to the same place twice for a month. But the word isn't out about that. It didn't develop in a way that was clear, and that may be something that we could work on. But yeah, we know what Danbury wants to be. It wants to be more of what it already is. But yeah, it probably could use some help in I don't want to use branding because that's just sort of newspeak, but sort of it could use some help in clarifying some of those things. I think Danbury's in a great place, one of the best cities in Connecticut, but it certainly suffers from a lack of identity. That is absolutely true. And it doesn't help that we don't have a skyline. It's the only city in Connecticut with size without a frigging skyline. And that's just so strange. We got 44 square miles and we're spread out.
Richard, were you have a thought?
I think it was in one of our meetings, maybe it's the one before this, that Bridget had made a comment to Paul's comment just now, is the lack of a department or a bureau for tourism promoting Danbury. As Paul said, we've got things here that we could promote. Currently the mall, we've got the university. Hopefully, one of the promotion items too would be the academy. So I think central to that would be is to come up with a department that does the PR and starts, promoting, Danbury for what it has and all the components. We seem to be, just scattered. But overall, I like the first idea, and I was there during that, is what we want to be. And I think Paul hit the nail on the head. We want to be a large city. We're no longer this small little town that people thought back in the 1960s or 1950s. And to that point, I think we've got to then start changing our philosophies and preparing for the growth to be a large, a large city, but with a controlled growth with regard to housing and businesses. I say controlled, so it's not just plopped everywhere. But I like the first idea. I think that's an excellent, question, and I like Bridget's idea about the tourism thing. So
okay. How about the comments about the downtown itself? Paul
downtown,
mentioned it doesn't have a skyline, but there are other areas of town that are happening. What do you think, Richard?
I don't know what, I hear the pros and cons of what they want to do in downtown, and I am not really sure what downtown is to be. You know, it's certainly not a place to go to eat. I think Mill Plain has captured that. You know, if you want to build apartment houses to get people to live down there, then you're going to have to support it with, you know, stores that would grocery stores so people could walk. You don't have to use your cars, as well as restaurants. So to that point, you know, I think if you're going to plan to build homes down or apartments, then you've got to look to surround that with a particular plan that would support and businesses that would support that group of people that want to live there. So that, you know, there has to be some sort of a plan or a vision for the downtown area and stick to it. Right now, to me, it just seems that we've been chasing ourselves over the number of years, you know, thinking it's going to be this, thinking it's going to be a restaurant area, the entertainment area, and for whatever the reasons, it just never materialized. And we seem to be hanging on.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I think there has to be more of a you know, some sort of a structured vision and a game plan and stick to it.
Perry wants to make some comments.
Might I argue that the TOD plan is somewhat of an outline to that vision and idea? What do you think, Sharon?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have focused on the downtown. We, you know, that whole plan is about the downtown and what we can continue to do. And I think we have made, you know, we've taken steps to implement the recommendations of that plan. Again, we don't own the buildings, so we have to figure out maybe some additional strategies to incentivize people's property owners to, you know, invest in their properties. And, you know, it's incremental steps. We're going to have a whole bunch of new residents when the new apartment building opens. Again, it's, you know, that's the tallest building in a while anywhere downtown. And, you know, we're definitely taking into consideration comments, A, recommendations from the TOD plan, and B, comments through this process and affordable housing plan to look at zoning related issues downtown to best kind of move us towards a more vibrant downtown and incentivize people to develop there. If assuming the train comes, that will help, obviously, do that. So yeah, I think that we're continuing to be pretty laser focused on it. I mean, we're investing in our infrastructure. We're making you know, there's drainage improvements and road, you know, Tim's on top of the road, we paving the roads down there, you know, creating places or improving places for people to enjoy the outdoors and things like that. So there is this continued focus.
Just has to, you know, I wasn't, yeah, don't get me wrong, I wasn't saying that anything that we're doing was, you know, was negative. I'm just saying that, you know, it has to be laid out so people can understand it and look at it and you know, basically come up with, I have an idea as to all the points, Sharon, that you were just mentioning. And if you want to include downtown and say you want to bring in more commercial businesses, you know, I don't know if there's a height restriction on how high or tall buildings have to be, but, you know, the aspect of bringing it downtown, if you can bring industry in there and have it, you know, downtown, again, serviced with apartment buildings being there and restaurants, and you have commercial office buildings, if that's a possibility. So, you know, I think what we're doing here as part of our commission is laying out these ideas, which is good. You know,
And I agree. I think it's part of a message.
Yeah,
As Paul said, we're not good at getting the message out. So
it's, you know, it's a matter of tooting your own horn. You know, we've got good things, you know, we've got good things to brag about. And it's just a matter if we have one department, I say one department, or if we have someone who's able to do this, you know, it would be a good tourism type of situation, have people come in to see what Danbury is all about. And as we discussed before, there were certain elements here that would, should be able to bring people other than just come here for the mall and do some shopping.
Yeah. So
Right.
PJ had to jump off. Let me just, so everybody, I think, has seen his comments in the chat, PJ from the chamber. So, we're looking at that. Let's, going vertical. we're totally looking at that, and we'll continue to do that.
Right.
So, okay.
Okay, a few more of the issues that were identified. There it is right now, right there. Danbury needs a brand that is very much related to the first comment. And we talked about the downtown aesthetics. That's not where it ends, though, is it? There's just a lot of other work that has to be done to energize the downtown. So I think we've covered a lot of this ground. Let's talk about some of the ideas that surfaced around economic development. One is to really do a better job of working with the relationship the city has with Western Connecticut. It should be WCSU there, but and are there other universities or colleges operating out of the city? That was
Naugatuck is downtown.
of course not.
And in fact, they were so big, they left one building and rented the building across the street and outfitted it. And you do see, it's great to see the lights on in that building again. And we'll see what happens for the spring semester, but I could tell you again this fall when there were students upstairs, and parking in the garages and walking from the garage to the corner right here at West and Main. We need the coffee shop, we need a little retail store, we need, there's a population to be, ready to be served. So, just, kind of took a wallop from, the pandemic, but as everywhere else did, but, they lost that. The foot traffic is important for all the uses downtown.
So does there continue to be opportunities surrounding a greater university presence in the downtown, or is that probably as big as it's going to be?
I can't speak for Naugatuck. I know that they have their population or student population is growing. If there's opportunity there, I'm not so sure. Like WestCon, other than their White Street campus, which is big to begin with, would take another specific building, downtown. But and we continue to have relationships, obviously, with the universities, both of them, and discussions with them about their role and the importance of the students and the faculty being downtown. But I don't disagree. A connection to get WestCon students downtown is always something we should continue to look at. Yeah, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, there was this crazy thing that happened in the late 80s and early 90s between WestCon and the community of youth in Danbury. I'm not going to get into that now, but it did spark a renaissance of youthful exuberance in the city, which could happen again. It was a cultural thing, and it lasted. It was one of those lights that burned twice as bright, but lasted half as long. It was amazing while it happened, but it stopped like a lot of things. But it could happen again. Naugatuck, I agree with Sharon. There's a slight difference in the student population because they're mostly older students who are using the university more for employment than perhaps expansion, educational expansion. It is an immediate means to an end. Get a degree, get a job.
Right.
And they're very focused on that and not necessarily up for spending a lot of time hanging out and doing sophomoric nonsense that the typical normal students would do, which you would see in New Haven, you would see in other, even West Hartford, other college towns.
Right.
As far as the old Feinstein's building, there are plans to tear it down and rebuild something approaching the original Feinstein's building, which was just a gorgeous building with a turret that burned down in the mid 70s. So there are plans that whether that comes to fruition or not is not for me to say. Music and culture, we tried partnering with WestCon, with the Charles I Center for the Performing Arts. That worked and then didn't work, and that had more to do with well, I don't really want to say in this forum what it had more to do with, but it's something that we are looking at bringing back, and that would be a West Side cultural connection between the university, not a downtown one.
Right, right.
Bring a hotel to downtown. That's beyond me. I don't know anything about the hotel business. I don't even know what that would do. I don't even know why we would want one, but I guess people are smarter than me about that kind of stuff. If that helps drive a renaissance downtown, then sure, I'd be more than willing to look at it. Grocery options, boy, I got to tell you, if you can't find a grocery store in Danbury, you're just not looking. I mean, if you fall over, there's a good chance you'll land in some grocery store's parking lot. We are so over grocery. I feel sorry for those guys because there is so much competition. But it is true that like in a little CN5 like Germantown or Worcester Village, they have these little sort of bodegas, and maybe we could see more of those in non-CN5 areas. That would be something that Sharon would have to look at. Relaxing zoning requirements to allow a food store to go in an underserved neighborhood. But we do have a lot of them, and then more entertainment and art downtown. We've talked about that. I don't have a solution for that. I mean, I know what I would do. I can't tell you if it would work, but the things that we've tried so far clearly have not. So it's obviously, I think we're all on the same page that it is time to reevaluate what we've been doing with the downtown and come up with a plan that at least try another plan. Whether that works or not remains to be seen.
Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts on these ideas that surfaced? All right, well, let's go on to the next slide. And this is our final slide on ideas for economic development across the city. While I finish recording some of these notes, just have a look yourselves and let me know if there's anything that really jumps out at you, that you're really supportive of the idea, or something that you think the city's already doing that's been well explored, or maybe something that's just a bad idea.
I guess the only thing that I would say is we just have to be cautious about is, and I know it's an option, but I do know in cities around the country, they had had some issues, about the e-bikes and e-scooters. And we thought about doing a test area for them last year before. Wow, it has to be probably in 2019. Where I actually rode one in the parking lot here. I almost killed myself. I'm just clumsy. But we have to remember, like, we're on a state road. It gets, 30, 40,000 cars a day. Introducing scooters. I've seen them in San Francisco. I've seen them in LA. And it just... They're
in Hartford now, too.
Yeah, they're in Hartford, right.
Yep.
I think we just want to be a little bit cautious about that.
Yeah, I got an idea.
Richard, go ahead. Yeah.
I sort of like number 2, where it says bring more high-paying jobs to the city. I think it's a hedge against the amount of support that we have in the city to the service industry. I think earlier we had the slide showing that healthcare was the #1 employer, and then underneath that, I believe it was the service industry.
Right.
But in the future of the retail business, I do think that to our point that we want to grow as a city and be more profitable for the city, then we have to start bringing in some more high-paying jobs. We had slides, I think it was last week, which there were huge disparities between the different areas of payment. Most of them range between the $30,000 and $40,000 range, and then the other groups, I think
in the
there were
6
2
figures
groups of memory, were or, you know, 6 figures. So
Yep.
we've got to get something, you know, to bridge that. And that, you know, that's a hard task, but I think with what we're trying to do, you know, would eventually bring in these particular jobs once we can attract industry and then also figure out where to put them.
Okay.
You know, I'm fearful of the retail business, you know, looking at the future. You know, I don't want to get caught, you know, with having a high unemployment, you know, if that stuff just drops, you know, very, very quickly. So we've got to keep that in the back of our mind.
So the idea of maintaining economic diversity remains
Very much so. Yeah,
very
we've got to
important.
start looking at the diversity.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. It all, you know, it all goes part and parcel. You know, we talk about the downtown. You need all these little service or businesses. You know, you need barbershops. You need the little coffee shops. You need little restaurants. You need a little grocery store. You know, for the people in downtown who are not going to get in the car and drive to one of these, you know, large supermarkets that we have. So it's a whole, you know, if you put one thing in and you want it to grow, you're going to have to sort of work it so that you allow for the support services that feed into what you're looking to do, so that there's a happy medium in there and people are comfortable living there because they have all the amenities that they want. They don't want to have to live there and then drive, you know, get in their car and drive someplace to do shopping or get a haircut or whatever they want to do. But so it's just part of a planning process.
And what about the idea of building a stronger pipeline to local trades, for local labor to local trades? You know, some that seems like it's happening already through Naugatuck Valley. But is there more opportunity to better take the workforce that you have and prepare them for local industries?
The only thing I can think of there is educationally is to, I'm a big fan of the trade schools. You know, I'm not a firm believer that everybody should, you know, graduate high school and go to college. You know, I think, you know, trade schools are important. And I think in the future, you know, trades are going to be extremely important. But it's to the connection between education and these skills have to be made. You know, we're fortunate to have one trade school here in Danbury, but it's, you know, to get in there, you know, it's overcrowded. And I think the state has to have more of these trade schools so that we can meet this particular demand.
Okay. Right, anything else?
Yeah, no.
Okay, let's move on. Housing. And I'll try to get through this real quick on the issues and save a little more time for ideas. You know, the homelessness issues seem like it cut both ways in our discussions with people. There was an acknowledgement that it's real, that it's a problem. You know, it's a problem for the city to manage. It's a problem for people that don't have homes. The fact that they're homeless is a problem. However, the Super 8 shelter also, it seems like it presented a whole other suite of problems while solving the immediate homeless needs at the same time. And we had people on both sides of the fence on that issue. It seems like if you lived in the neighborhood of Super 8, of that shelter, you were not in favor, and if you were not in the neighborhood, it seemed like a better idea. So that surrounds the homeless housing issue. And then finally, obviously, concerns about the real estate market as it is right now. It's very hot. The price of homes is costly. It's difficult for seniors to stay in their homes. It's difficult for some first-time home buyers as well. And the last comment came from an individual. That wasn't a theme that was constant, but I think it does represent an opinion that is not unique to that individual in Danbury. And this, to some degree, that came up in discussion last night on our affordable housing call, is that maybe there's too much affordable housing in Danbury. It's above the 10% state requirement of affordable housing. And I think there's some concern on the behalf of people that Danbury doesn't want to become the regional supplier of affordable housing, that local towns should do their share, and that the mix is about right where it's at in Danbury now. And anything to add to this? Anything that surprises you on this list?
Paul?
Yeah, just two things. I mean, I agree
Yep.
with you on the last point. Danbury really does not want to be the hub either for homelessness or for affordable housing. I mean, we'd certainly be willing to do our fair share, and we have. We need to stress that point. We have more than the surrounding communities when it comes to affordable housing, and we have more than the surrounding communities when it comes to homeless shelters. I take some issue with the NIMBYism. We have sourced and located homeless shelters in Danbury for the last 50 years with very little blowback from the community, but they are very different homeless shelters than what was proposed on the corner of Lake Avenue and I-84. We have homeless shelters in areas and people don't even know where they are. So I'm not going to even mention where they are because we don't need to get into that. But there are these little tiny sort of pocket homeless shelters all over the place. I mean, Amos House comes to mind. Aaron Samuels, formerly Cherry Street, there's one. We have them on Spring Street. We've had them all of West Street, Harmony, and Montgomery, if not homeless shelters. Certainly our facilities for social services, and have existed there for decades with no interference from the neighbors. It is very possible to source things like that in this city because we've done it. What's a little bit harder is to create something that was proposed at the Super 8. That's a really different. It's an order of magnitude different than what Danbury has done before. That was so gigantic and so in your face that it just well, I don't need to. You don't need to go back over that. But yeah, this is Danbury is doing what it needs to be doing for affordable housing and for the homeless. Asking Danbury to do what other communities need to be doing is where we start getting into trouble.
Okay. Anyone else?
I don't know. Question.
Richard? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what's the, I like what Paul said, but as a comment, it's just my own comment, don't want to go further on this. The rollout of the situation of the homelessness at the motel was just a poor rollout. It just didn't give people the understanding as to what this organization what this organization was going to do, what they had there as far as support services, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it was just a poor rollout. But that being said, my question is on the bottom, how do we differentiate between affordable housing and senior housing? That's because I hear both. And I'm not sure if it's one and the same. Seniors want to downsize, but they want to downsize to a place that they can afford to live. So
Sure. Yep.
Is there, in my own edification, I don't really understand the difference between a definition of affordable housing and one that's senior housing. And don't get me wrong, I'm not looking at senior housing being one of those places where it's a healthcare facility. I'm just, thinking of a concept of a 55 and over, type of concept where you're looking at a senior housing.
Right.
Is there a definition of affordable housing?
Yeah, well, our references here are twofold. First of all, the state has a very strict definition of affordable housing. That's the reference to the 10% ratio. and in some case, some of that housing may provide housing for seniors. And then there is the whole issue surrounding housing that is affordable, that might not qualify or be defined as affordable housing by the state, but it is affordable or more affordable, and which is housing that could potentially accommodate seniors that want to downsize. A lot of the conversations we've had thus far through the affordable housing working group have been around that conversation about housing need and the need to supply a greater diversity of housing options within the city to address the various needs, including those of seniors that need to downsize. So I think you can do both.
I think it's good the way you phrase it would be the housing options. I think that's a good terminology, and it takes into account both of those solutions. So thank you.
Okay,
I appreciate
sure.
that.
Yeah, well, let's go on to the ideas that came about, because we touched upon that. And some of these ideas we discussed yesterday afternoon as well. So one idea is to build, and this goes back to our ideas about the downtown as well, is to build up, to allow for an increased diversity, so to accommodate more housing units by building up. And whether that's in the downtown or some surrounding districts, it needs to be figured out. And additionally, to provide incentives to builders to develop affordable housing. There's some comments, really more policy related comments about limiting housing subsidies, and much of that's really controlled by the state. The city doesn't have much influence on that. Consider smaller group homes. I think that in part is a reaction to the Super 8 proposal. So rather than a big facility, smaller facilities like the city currently has. And expanding support programs for seniors. So that goes straight to your comments, Richard. I'm not, Sharon, do you want to comment on any programs that are currently existing that directly related to senior housing and accommodating seniors?
Well, I mean, we do have a very active, a department.
Senior services, right?
Yeah. Senior services, yeah. And there's also, I think, a tax deferral.
Right, the tax
credit.
Program.
There's a tax credit for seniors who stay who stay in their homes. And I can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
Okay.
I mean, the minute we move on, I'll think of something else for seniors.
Right.
But I mean, we have a big senior services department and lots of activities. We'd have to see. But it is, housing for seniors or people who want to stay in the community and downsize has been a consistent comment throughout this process.
Right.
As well as, when we were doing the TOD plan, it came up as well, because there is senior housing downtown.
Yep.
So.
An idea, and this goes back to what I just mentioned, Richard, is to create more of all types of housing. So greater diversity of housing supply. I think there is a concern or the idea that people had that investors are buying up homes and limiting opportunities for homeowners, particularly first-time buyers, and to try to limit the amount of investor-owned homes. And I'm not sure how the city would do that, but really the idea is to encourage more owner-occupied units in the city. And some other ideas surrounding greater partnerships with developers such as Kennedy Flats as they provide amenities on site for the residents. Are there opportunities for shared resources with the neighborhood and exploring more partnerships between the city and the private developer to have those community facilities be shared with the neighborhood? And then finally, really trying to target the college graduate market and to get them to stay or locate in Danbury and ensure that you have housing at price points that appeal to them and are affordable to them. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay, let's move on then. City facilities and services. I ran this discussion at our workshop. We covered a lot of ground, both literally and figuratively here. One of the concerns that was central to a lot of these issues is that the city has ordinances, yet there's a desire for more regular enforcement. And an example of that, and a lot of these surround quality of life issues. An example of that was the city's noise ordinance. I heard from multiple people that were said it's just simply not enforced, and maybe it's not enforceable, but it's not enforced. In the vicinity of Rogers Park was one place referenced, but other areas of the city as well. Surrounding Rogers Park and maybe other parks was the need for enforcement of dusk to dawn policies. I guess people are using parks at night and late hours and causing noise nuisances. Some folks thought the city hall only being open 4 days a week is inadequate for a city of Danbury's size. There's also an idea here, and this is a discussion that's happening across the country right now. And this is in reference to first responders, that the city needs specialists, maybe outside of police officers, that can be first responders for social disturbances and mental health crises. Concerned about schools being overcrowded. We talked about sidewalks already. The need for more funding at Terrywell Park. More than one person commented on the taste of the city's water, tasting like chlorine or metallic, and I'm not sure what that's about. Concerns that the 311 system is not efficient, mostly related to responses not being prompt. Concern about new housing development without reinvestment in schools, and that the city needs schools at all levels, and that there are few or no services such as public safety, recreation, and schools on the west side of the city, where there's been a lot of growth. All right, any responses to that list of issues identified?
Take the chlorine in the water right off the list. The
Yeah, I like the city's water.
chlorine is a residual of chlorine has to be left in the water,
Right.
so that if it's non-existent when tested, you know there's a problem.
Right.
If there's a residual, and we're talking parts per millionth of chlorine in the water, you know that there are no problems in your system that would the chlorine would have to fix, such
Right.
as an infiltration of a broken pipe or whatever.
Right.
So it's there for a reason, so that you're safe, and it's very, very small amounts.
Tim, I expected that response.
Well,
Anything else on this list that really jumps out at you?
Rogers Park, I just spent quite a bit of, the city just spent quite a bit of money invested in Rogers Park at the Westerners Field.
Yep.
And we continue. The city just purchased a new piece of equipment for aeration that is
Right.
parallel to many of the golf courses in the country. Deep tine aeration,
Yep.
very expensive piece of specialized equipment to continue to improve. So we're constantly improving the parks.
Okay.
And I don't want to use this as me defending, but
Yeah. Yep.
They have to know that these are the things we think about on a daily basis, and we're constantly working to improve.
Okay.
on. And
How about the-
also, we also
Yeah,
have a
go ahead.
committee that meets twice a month. That is all of the department heads that discuss all of these things.
Right.
When we have Rogers Park on Monday mornings and there's excess garbage from one particular area, the assistant chief sits on that committee and we discuss ways to possibly enforce, less partying in that corner on
Right.
a Sunday evening. So these are discussions that we have. And we have a committee that meets, like I said, twice a month to go over all of the departments and see where we can interact to improve the city.
And how about enforcement of noise ordinance, by example, and the 311 response and the timeliness of response? What are the thoughts there as to whether or not there's more work that could be done or it could be done better?
First of all, you don't want to respond to 311 until you have an answer.
Right.
So it's easy, the citizens don't accept, okay, thank you. We'll figure that one out. We have to do the research behind the scenes to look into the issue that was brought, who owns the property, where are the property lines, what's the setbacks on the properties, and that's just our division. Do we own that tree or don't we own that tree?
Sure,
And
sure.
those answers aren't always readily available. So perhaps we could find a way to get to those answers more quickly, either through, an expansion of our computers, which we're always working on, new software, so on and so forth,
Right,
to make
right.
those things happen better. But they have to know that, we're actually looking into that complaint and doing the research. So the answer we give you is the right one, not just, okay, we'll get to it.
Okay. And finally, the comment about schools and services on the west side of the city as well. Related issues, separate but related issues.
Know that a lot of time and energy is going into that, that process. We know that there's a large group of school-age children that are coming up through the system, and the city is looking at, and it's well publicized that the city is looking at a possible facility on the west side. So,
Right.
using the
Okay.
existing building.
Right, and just to piggyback that, I was going to jump in the same thing about a substation for the police, and there's a ambulance station that was built as part of a project over on the west side. And so, one of the city's ambulances is housed over there as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, we recognize that. Again, I think there's a lot of messaging here, kind of what we're doing. We think people know, but and then we hear, lots of comments.
All right.
So.
And Paul, you have your hand raised?
Yep.
Yeah, I do. Is my mic on? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
City ordinances such as noise ordinance need more regular enforcement. Boy, I'll tell you, unless you've been assaulted by noise, it's pretty amazing how many people make that complaint. We created a new noise ordinance based on new statutes from the state that allowed us to enforce noise by hearing, as opposed to the previous system, which required us to actually measure it using SPL meters.
Right.
So we're still feeling our way with that, but that will improve. City Hall open 4 days a week. Yeah, it would be great if we could keep it open 6 days a week, particularly a few hours on Saturday. That's a union issue that we need to work out. Schools are overcrowded. We're on it. We're building new ones, lots of new ones, and expanding the ones that we have. Sidewalks we've discussed. Terry, well, I think actually is in pretty good shape. I'm there quite often. I'm not quite sure what's up with that? I mean, it's got good trails, it's got great ponds. It's
I
just
think
a
part of
great-
that probably stems from Hearthstone Castle and.
Well, that's true. No, it's
Yeah.
shameful what happened to Hearthstone. It is that when we bought that park in '85, there were people living in that building, and now it's a wreck. It was just a shocking oversight. City water tastes like chlorine. I like the city water. I'm with Tim on that. I drink it. I thought maybe I was the last guy that actually drank tap water, but apparently I'm not. Maybe there's something that we can do. I don't know. I mean, Tim seems to think you've got to leave the chlorine in there. I happen to like the taste. Maybe that makes me an aberrant. I don't know, but public safety, West Side. Look, the whole West Side thing is a work in progress. It was improved in 2001. The build out was supposed to take about 25 years. I talked to Toll Brothers a few months ago. They said they're going to be finishing up this year. Maybe they're already done. So it's a little bit ahead, but now the whole thing with the old carbide building itself is starting up. So that'll take a few years. But yeah, I've spoken to the attorney for one of the large landowners recently deceased. There's an additional elapsed parcel that this person owned. And I think that I may be looking at that. I may be putting something in front of the council to purchase that. It's 40 acres on the west side. I just don't know if it's all in Danbury or if some of it's in New York State and what that would mean. But 40 acres would allow us to put another school there. It would allow us to put first responder facilities there. 40 acres, it's a lot. You can put a couple of things there. So maybe we'd be looking at that. But it does bring up a couple of points. The first one being that the development on the west side includes recreational facilities that are privately owned. Kids, whatever, the playgrounds, basketball courts, and things like that. The city had 13 acres. We sold it, so we may have to look at doing something like that. But we are, and that's all going to probably happen in the next 2 or 3 years. So we're on that too. There will be some announcements in the next couple of years about that. COVID has sort of, put a lot of that stuff on the back burner, and the news the last couple of days has not been great. But I'm pretty optimistic that we will get through even this, and we can get back to managing the city and doing some of these things in the sixth ward on the west side that we may have held off for the last couple of months, a year or so.
Okay. All right, thank you. Well, let's move on to the next slide, because these are some of the ideas that surfaced around these issues. So the idea of investing in education, I know we just talked about schools, but in addition to schools, everything inside the school, teachers, curriculum, facilities, supplies, whatever it may be. And even if it comes at the expense of increasing the city's mill rate, it needs to be done, right? That was an idea. Related to that is updating school buildings, providing more high quality technical schools. This goes back to Richard's comment, that provide alternative career pathways. Elementary school on the west side of the city, and maybe that 40 acres allows for that. Better fund and maintain city-owned historic buildings, provide lighting at more athletic fields, expand and improve schools and rec facilities as new development occurs. A lot of this is related to development on the west side and the schools and new athletic facilities not necessarily following right away. Continue to ensure that the city has adequate sewer and water infrastructure to meet the needs of residents now and in the future, and to do a better job. And this comes back to communication, to do a better job communicating with residents what some of the constraints are, what the city is doing to address needs. Improve all facilities at parks. And we talked about the west side already, and invest was the theme, the main theme. All right, how does that strike you? Paul?
I'm sorry, I left that up. That it all makes
Okay.
perfect sense. I'm going to lower
All
my
right.
hand. Sorry
All right.
about that.
Anyone else? Richard, Ed, anyone else?
No.
Yeah, I just had a couple of thoughts, and maybe they apply to not just this this portion of the discussion, but maybe more than one.
Sure.
But it seems like as we go through these, there's a lot of these things that were brought up by members of the public that really are being dealt with, but people don't know it.
Yeah.
And it's like, perception is reality. And I was in the, we're thinking about ways to communicate just, if you're talking about some of the recreational opportunities
Yep.
in the city, to have one central place where you could go to one website that would give you everything that's going on in the city with all our recreational, all our parks, all the activities that are going on, and in one place, because it's more and more, it's an internet driven communication is how people operate now. But also all these projects that the city takes on and manages on a day-to-day basis, and people don't know. We don't have a real Danbury paper anymore that used to communicate fun
Sure.
things like that. So it seems like we need a different way to spread the word on the great stuff that we do have. And that was just maybe not just as far as city projects and facilities, but maybe community calendar related stuff. And I don't know, just top of my head thoughts on
Sure.
how to deal with a lot of these things that really are being managed, but people don't know it.
Yeah, it seems to be a very consistent theme, doesn't it? Richard, go ahead.
I agree with that point, and I think it's so critical, and from my perspective, being on the school board for so many years, that was my biggest cry, is that there is so much, pardon me, positive news that the schools do, but there's never a unified place where people could understand what's going on. I kept recommending at that time to Sal Pascarella that we invest in a PR firm, but of course there was a funding issue, but to that point is start bragging about all of the good things that we had, and combined with the element of not only the schools, but with the city. And it gets back to my earlier comments too about a tourism thing. I think there is many, many things that we do that I want to say is good or even great that we should be touting, and we don't. And it's something that maybe we should look into, is to put together some sort of a department, or I guess a department, or some agency that can do these particular things. I found it frustrating with the schools to find out what events were being taken place. We've got 19 schools, and unless you were a parent of a specific school, you didn't know if there was an event taking place in that school, and you heard about it later.
Sure.
So, there wasn't a calendar of events that said, okay, on this date, this school's going to do this, and this school's going to do this, so that you had your choice in the future, to decide if you wanted to attend something, rather than hear about it and say, oh, gee, I would have liked to have gone, but I missed it because I didn't hear about it. So I think this is a good idea, and we should look on this. It certainly helps, because it helps invest, because the more you do that, the more you get recognized. And again, it brings in more people it creates an interest. So just leave it at that.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to our last topic, and that is cultural and historic resources. These are the issues identified. There's concern about all these historic buildings, and the fact that there doesn't seem to be enough resources to go around to improve them to the extent that people would like to see. Octagon House being an issue or a challenge. And then also privately held properties that aren't quite there yet. You know, people would like to see the Palace Theater fully restored with the hall or the auditorium completely opened up. There's concern about Meeker's Hardware building and other properties as well. In terms, we talked about the Ives Center and the desire for more use of that space and a more functional partnership with the state. We talked about Hearthstone already. So I wonder how these comments strike you. It probably looks very familiar. This is familiar ground. We've already covered it in prior meetings, but anything you'd like to add or rebut? You know, if $10 million of Recovery Act money found its way into Danbury for preserving historic properties, would that be the solution here? I mean, does that address
That would help.
It would solve
Yeah.
a lot of problems.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
I mean, we could stabilize the mansion. We could resurrect the Charles Ives Center. We could,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Look, money is everything. I mean, yeah, okay, desire and all that stuff is important, but basically that jumpstarts the funding. If you've got the funding, you can just go right to the chase. Yeah, so it's going to be very interesting to see what all of this money means, what all these Restoration Act funds mean. But it does mean that the city of Danbury needs to get those funds. Other communities are already on the list and they're getting those checks now. We need to make sure, it's critical. We need to make sure that we're on the list and we're receiving those funds too. There's no shortage of what we need to spend money on. 10 million or 100 million, we could, use it overnight.
Right.
Make a tremendous difference to the city, tremendous difference.
Right. And recognize that, as you said, we don't own some of these,
Right.
at least these on the list. So, we really don't have much control over what happens to them, assuming they stay a viable a building. So the others, yes, we would have a plan for it, and we would love to get that influx of money because that would help. Obviously,
it also brings up a point about what we would do if we fixed up the Octagon House. If Giuseppe Machina came down and made the Octagon House like brand new all over, what would we do with it? If we resurrected the castle and we fixed it up so it was like it was 100 years ago, what would we do with that? What would we do with the palace if we acquired it and restored it? It would probably cost 25 to 30 million to do that. If the Beacon Theater in New York is any model, it could take tens of millions to completely redo the palace. Then what we would do? Those things are somewhat easier in the sense that they're just issues of imagination. But yeah, the money is the foundation for all of that stuff.
Right. I mean, Octagon as an example, and then we can move on. I mean, we obtained a lot of grant money from the state to plan, to prepare drawings. And we came up with a good viable project. And then, they stopped funding the program that we thought we could be tapped to use some of that money. And we used capital money that the council approved, thank goodness, to kind of shore up what was there so that, the Hearthstone debacle didn't happen again. So, it's stabilized, but to use it for the plans that were a good viable use at the moment is kind of out of our reach. Unless
Correct.
we had an
And
influx
so-
of several million
Right.
dollars.
And some of these buildings are in really good shape. If we ever acquire, I hope that we do, or somebody does, with an eye for preservation, the First Church on the corner of Drury Hill and West Street.
Right.
What would we do with that building? Trust me, we would fill that building up in 2 seconds. It's already in perfect condition. The city of Danbury could utilize that building for several different things. That would not be an issue. So I think that the idea of sitting down and scratching our heads for a couple of years about what we're going to do with the Octagon House or the Palace, it probably somewhat, I'm being a little facile. We'd figure it out in no time flat. But we just don't have
like,
money to do it.
Yeah, it sounds like the priority is to get the money and then figure out.
Correct. And I'll tell you something, the city is really good. It's extraordinarily good at grant chasing, extraordinarily good. As a council member, I'm approving grant applications every month, several every month, and many of them come through. So the department heads in Danbury are really, really experienced at successfully chasing down grants. But I mean, they're relatively small, $40,000 for seatbelt stuff and $80,000 for this, 500,000
right.
Seems like a lot for Kara and the COVID stuff. But compared to 50 million for a train station or 25 million for a performing arts center or something like that, it's kind of a different league. But yeah, if we, trust me, we got the money, we'd know what to do with it. It really is, at the end of the day, it's a money thing. And it almost always is.
Okay. Well, let's leave it at that. And because we've got several more comments, really all along the same lines, but I think we understand it. It really comes down to the need for money to enable or to address a lot of these issues, and finally to enable a lot of these ideas. And here are some of the ideas that came out of our meeting. It includes investing in the trails in town, doing some of the old courthouse, bring the downtown back to life, and greater public art presence in the downtown. Some other comments more specific to Main Street and the downtown was a concern that paying for parking on Main Street is keeping people away from the downtown. A desire for the Historic District Commission to have greater resources and a little more power. And of course, a strategic plan to bring arts and cultural institutions to the downtown.
Just to jump in, there is a proposal for the old courthouse and for the old jail across the street. So that's in the works.
Where does that stand?
I can't say at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's in the works, so we'll see.
Okay.
And listen, it may not come to fruition, but it's something that we're looking at.
Okay. Anything else in response to these ideas?
I just think there's some consistency in the themes that are coming through.
Yeah.
On the other areas as well.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
And a few more comments. And this is going back to the idea that the city really needs some sort of central hub to communicate about all the events that are occurring in the city. So there it is surfacing again, that idea of being doing a much better job promoting everything that's available to the public. And some other ideas about doing races at Terrywall Park and integrating more local education about the city's historic assets and into the educational curriculum for kids. Yeah. The last comment, Sharon, the city, let me ask you, the city should continue to support the Veterans Memorial. Is there some sort of fear that the city is going to play less of a role in supporting that institution, or do you know what that might
I'm not aware of that. No, I'm not aware of that.
Okay, all right. And what exactly how exactly does that work? The city's support for veterans, it's entirely city funded, the recreational programming there, is that correct?
Well, do you mean at the War Memorial or at the Veteran?
I assume they were talking about the war memorial, but
Well, there's funding, so the city, I think, provides some funding there. It's a 501c3.
right.
Right, organization. It's our building, but they maintain it and they run all
Okay.
programs out of the building. And there's also a full gym in it that with memberships, so which is
Okay.
very active. And that, they're looking obviously to expand that, but again, use of the gym and all of that, a lot of the
Okay.
programs, were impacted by COVID and the pandemic,
Right.
but they did, I think in fact, I think the bond commission is voting maybe this week on a huge grant for the war memorial. It's part of the
Okay.
bond package. So, yeah.
All right, that's likely what it's in reference to, is the city continuing to fully support that facility.
Yeah, we have
and its
funded them.
operations.
Yeah.
Okay,
through
all right.
Not through operations of the building, but the capital program, because
Yeah.
we use the building for emergency purposes as well. We used it as a
Okay.
shelter for a while.
And
Okay.
the state caucus has been really good at getting grants
Yes.
for the War Memorial. Jim Maloney was able to lock down a grant for the roof, like
Yep.
a million plus for that. And now Ken Gucker and Bob Godfrey and those guys, the state caucus from Danbury is working on, as Sharon mentioned, grants for some interior modifications and renovations. So that they've been really good. It doesn't pay for itself. I mean, it can't.
Right.
But this, between the state and the city, we've kept it running for over 50 years, and we intend to keep doing that.
And it plays an important role in our community.
It does.
Yeah.
It's sort of a central locus for a lot of things having to do with Veterans Day and Pearl Harbor and things like that. It's a spiritual, as well as a physical. It has its own identity. It's very important to the identity of Danbury.
Okay. All right. Well, that is likely what that comment's in reference to, is the importance that has to Danbury's identity and the significance of the relationship the city has with supporting that facility. All right. Well, that concludes our summary of the workshop. We also had a workshop last week online, and we did something very similar to what we did this evening with you, as we reviewed those comments that we heard from the prior workshop. So we had people provide us additional feedback on the 9th. And we had a pretty good discussion with about 20 people that participated virtually. And so I won't go through all those, but we have it documented here. So when we circulate this PowerPoint, the PDF, you can dive into those comments that we heard from the January or the December 9th virtual workshop. Right, the survey, and we're late in the evening, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I will say that we are going to close out the survey. I think Thursday would probably be a good day to do it, because as we get into Christmas and the holidays, we're not going to have too many people that want to spend time taking the survey. So once we close it out, what we can do is we can export the summary of the survey and as a PDF, and I'll provide that to Sharon and Jennifer, and she could circulate it to all of you if you really want to dig into the responses. And that summary report will provide all of the open-ended responses that people provided, as well, everything they wrote in response to some of the questions that we've asked. Really quick, I did want to go over some of the highlights, and I'm gonna blow through this so that you can get on with your evening. And if you want to take more time to review it, as I mentioned, we're going to circulate this PDF as we always do. We're mostly heard from people that live in Danbury, overwhelmingly about 90% of people that participated. And the greatest share of people participating live north of I-84, but we did have representation from other areas of the city. Overwhelmingly, and this is typical of just about any survey we conduct, we hear from people that are older and been in the community longer. And so the orange bars there, 50 to 69 are the greatest cohorts of people we heard from. But we did, if you look at the under 20, that's normally close to zero. And here, through a direct effort to reach out to Danbury High School, we got a very good representation from people under 20. Most people we heard from are homeowners, but we did have renters and property and business owners, as well as workers in the city represented. And once again, most people have been in the community for more than 20 years, either living, working, owning a business or property in Danbury. And this is typical too of surveys we conduct. We hear from people that have had a longer relationship with that community. And this is a very important question we asked, what thought best represents your thoughts of Danbury? Most people are incrementalists, and the greatest share of people in Danbury are incrementalists. They like to see the city continue to grow and change, but incrementally. That being said, we had more people that are open to significant growth or change than people who would prefer to keep things just as they are. And that's not true of every community we work in. So very often it's opposite. People would rather keep it as it is rather than be open to significant growth and change. So it definitely suggests that people are very receptive to the city thinking bold and taking big action. When asked what cities should focus more on, overwhelmingly it was roadways and traffic, but also trails, greenways, passive open space rated high, protection, natural resources, and economic development. Those are the 4 top responses. Focus less on, and here we're kind of, what concerns you most about the future of Danbury? It was population growth, followed by traffic management, the condition of the roadways, and property tax rates, which that one surprised me because your rates are so low, and maybe people see the writing on the wall with the need for more schools and improved services. They're fearful of property tax rates going up. Maybe that's what that stems from. Danbury's business environment rated pretty good. Good, okay, but the excellent responses were pretty few. So that certainly indicates some room for improvement. And when asked what kind of commercial development should be encouraged, food service, arts and entertainment, and education and training facilities rated highest. When asked what parts of the city should be a focus for economic development, it was the downtown, but almost an equal number of people felt really that growth should be directed citywide. And when we say citywide, we don't mean every corner of Danbury, but citywide throughout the city's commercial areas. Following that was the West Side. Housing. What we asked people what type of housing they most likely see themselves living in 10 years from now, and more than half of people thought they'd remain in their current home. However, we had a pretty good range of responses other than that, and that's people, about the same amount of people looking to move up in size of home and to move down in size of home. It was pretty balanced. So maybe people could do some trading in Danbury, and then a range of other responses as well. However, when we asked people what type of housing Danbury needs more of, we were really surprised to find that single family homes rated really high. We think of the city as having a really robust supply of single family homes, yet that type of housing still appears to be in demand, and people have the perception the city needs more of. However, the greatest response was senior housing, retirement age housing, followed by apartments and mixed use development, housing mixed with commercial. When asked what residential uses or should residential uses should be allowed in commercial zones, a lot of people agreed with this. However, we had a quarter of people said no, and another quarter or so really weren't sure if this was a good idea. So there seems to be still some mixed opinion as to whether or not a mixed use development is the way to go in Danbury. And so this is something that should really be explored some more to really better understand what people's concerns are around mixed use development. Transportation improvements, people would like to see roads and traffic addressed as the top priorities. Following that, however, was I-84, sidewalks and crosswalks, and traffic calming improvements. City services, schools, and once again, roadway and sidewalk maintenance jumping to the top. Open space and rec, people like to see more pathways, passive open space areas, and greater or improved lake access. Protection of natural resources and the environment, pretty much across the board, people felt that all these different areas of natural resource protection were important. Ridgeline didn't seem to resonate quite as much. If you remember from our presentation, those ridgelines are incredibly important for habitat. But across the board, people are very supportive of the idea of protecting natural resources and the environment. When we ask people about investing in environmentally sustainable infrastructure and practices, overwhelmingly, it seemed to be a very popular idea with a very small share of people, about 10%, saying not to invest. And some of the examples we provided were solar power and electric vehicles and charging infrastructure. Acquisition of open space, people are very supportive of the city acquiring and continuing to acquire open space. Almost 80% of people in favor. And that was it. So I'm sorry I kind of rushed through it, but yeah, you can review these in this presentation, and of course the summary report that we will send out will have a lot more detail and provide much greater insight into these responses. All right, so we just got done with a big effort with the workshops, and yet we're gearing up for another big public engagement effort, and that is happening in the 3rd and 4th weeks of January, and this is the focus group meetings. So unlike the public workshop where we gathered a bunch of people together to address all of the topics relevant to the POCD in one workshop, the focus group meetings are intended to be for a much smaller audience of invited stakeholders. They are open to the public, but we have some key stakeholders we would like to invite, and we will tackle one topic at a time. So there's our schedule. We have 2 topics per evening starting Tuesday, January 18th. Next is Wednesday, January 26th, and Thursday, January 27th. We had initially planned and hoped to conduct these at Danbury Library in person. However, Omicron is quickly derailing those plans, and Sharon and Jennifer and I basically made the decision to move online to ensure that we would be able to conduct these effectively, and we wouldn't have to abandon ship really late in the process. So we will conduct these online via Zoom. We will start promoting these and sending out invitations very soon. And I expect many of you would be participating as well. So Sharon and Jennifer will follow up with invitations for these meetings. Similarly, we are in a process, as I discussed before, with the affordable housing plan, and we need to do a public workshop in support of that effort. And we had initially planned on doing this at the library at the end of January, but we are moving to a virtual format for this meeting as well. This is, we're casting a wide net, so it's open to the public. We are going to reach out to some key stakeholders as well. And that will be conducted on Monday, January 24th at 6 p.m. And this flyer you see here will be going out shortly. All right, our schedule. So here we are in December, and our work this evening is a very important part of the plan development, is sorting and sifting through all of the information that's coming in from the public, prioritizing it, and better understanding what the priorities are. What's already being done versus what needs to be done. So thanks for your help in doing that. And we're just going to keep moving along. So our next steps are to conduct those focus group meetings. And we're at the point now where we could really start building the plan outline and developing a format for the document itself. So we will be moving on to that very soon and starting to build a comprehensive list of the key issues and the strategies, goals, recommendations that the plan will contain that will address those issues. So everything we sifted through tonight is going to start to be assembled into a master list that we can figure out how to present within the plan. Our next regular meeting will be in February instead of January, and that is because we are conducting focus group meetings on the evening of January 18th. This also affords us an opportunity to bring in all that new information that will come out of the focus group meetings, to condense it, to better understand it, and to bring that back to you. So I expect at our next meeting in February, we will have by then taken everything we've heard coming out of the survey, coming out of the workshops, coming out of the focus group meetings, and put that together into a really comprehensive list that really breaks up the issues, groups the issues, identifies the main themes, and takes those ideas that we discussed this evening, starts to shape them into potential goals and strategies that we can then discuss in February. So this affords us a little more time to do that. So that meeting, February 15th at 4 p.m. Okay. All right, I just threw a lot at you. Any questions or comments?
Well, one thing briefly, we have a Remember the Maine, I don't know what we call those things, remembrance, I guess, on the 15th at 5 o'clock. And also, I just had a quick question about those people who wanted expedited change in Danbury. Did they skew younger because you mentioned you got some younger people to come in from the high school because of your reach out? And generally, people who want expedited change happen to be younger. I was just, because I have to tell you, if they were older people, it would be kind of eye-popping. So if you have that information,
yeah,
I'd love to hear it.
We can cross-reference that to get to that. And that is the way that is the typical association. However, when you look at the share of participants, what we saw is really heavy participation on the older side, and lower participation in people in their 20s and under 20 in their 30s, relatively low. Yet at the same time, we're far more favored in the direction of big change relative to keeping things the same. So it'll be interesting to see once we cross-reference that by age, how that reads.
It sure would. I mean, God bless us feisty geezers. I mean, that's just great. I'm not seeing that when I'm walking around, but if that's what's going out there, I need to hear that. So
okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, Paul, just reach out to me if you would, and let's just figure out what that is on the 15th and what time it is. And I mean, we can maybe start this earlier. 5 o'clock.
Start at 3
at West Street, where the Sailors Memorial is.
Okay. We could do, if everybody's open to it, we could just bump it the 15th to 3 o'clock and then be.
Yeah. I think that would work.
Everybody here okay with that?
I'll find out. I'll speak to Dean and see what the story is. Yep.
Okay. All right. So let's leave it open if it comes to that, because otherwise,
right.
the weeks are
it's only December. I mean, it's pretty far out there.
Yeah. So
okay.
Moving it up an hour won't be a big deal. Okay. Sounds good. I know we didn't have a quorum, but obviously, so we're just going to, keep the minutes till next time. But again, this has been recorded, it's on YouTube, so we'll just post it to the website, and then we'll send you a PDF of this presentation. And we also have a separate write-up, if you want a separate write-up, from Francisco on all the issues and ideas for each topic area. So we could do that as well. It's not a problem.
Yeah, I believe we posted that already to the website.
Oh yeah, you did. Actually, you did.
Yeah.
Right. So you can just click on, go to the website and down to presentations, and then the summary is there, actually. But we'll send you this.
Hey, you know what? I think that main thing is on the 16th. I think my note was to remember it tomorrow. And when it popped up on my calendar, the note's on the 15th. I think I'll get back to you on that, but it may actually be on Wednesday, the next day.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll keep it on the 15th, and then we'll just reach out about, we have to ship times at all. Okay. All right. Sounds great. And you'll also hear from us on the meetings with the flyer, and you know, how to zoom into those as well.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I
Okay,
guess
thank
we'll-
you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks, Francisco.
Thanks, everyone.
6:25. All right.
Yeah.
What a
Thanks.
great
Have a good
job.
evening
Lots
now.
of-
New Year.
Lots of good
Okay.
info.
Thanks. Happy New Year. Healthy
Happy
holidays.
holidays,
No
everyone.
kidding. Stay
You
safe.
too.
Happy holidays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.